We are here on the incredible Pacific Ocean, right here leading into the harbor at Vancouver. Behind me, there's a number of large transport ships coming into port. Obviously, Vancouver is a trading city. Obviously, when you're on the Pacific coast, one of those major trade destinations will be China. Canada's relationships with China have been pretty toxic over the last number of years, but since Donald Trump's open trade war with every country in the world except, it seems, Russia, Canada has made a real reconsideration of where we stand with China. And I think it's really important that we start talking about this. When Trump launched his trade bomb against pretty much every country in the world, including that little island with penguins, only 2 countries stood up to him. The EU didn't stand up to him. The United Kingdom didn't stand up. But Canada, under then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, said we'd go back dollar for dollar, pound for pound in retaliation, and it shocked MAGA. The other country that stood up was China. Donald Trump has really damaged the American economy through his unilateral trade war. And what it's done is it's given an incredible advantage to the Chinese economy. What Donald Trump doesn't understand is that the Chinese government is willing to accept a lot of pain in order to have their way. And so for Canada right now, we're changing our whole perception of the world based on the fact that our number one trading partner, our ally, our neighbor along the unguarded border is no longer our ally or our friend, and has threatened us again and again and again. It was significant that recently that Prime Minister Carney talked about the trade risks in our relationship with the United States and our need to manage that relationship. And he basically said that it was similar to the risks that we face with China. That's an extraordinary thing to say, because we just remember just a few years ago when the United States pushed Canada to arrest Meng Wanzhou, the head of Huawei, because the Americans were fighting with China over the control of the digital space and wanted Huawei out of the market. And Canada agreed to arrest Meng Wanzhou for extradition to the United States. China retaliated heavily. They arrested and imprisoned 2 Canadians, the 2 Michaels, held them in custody for way too long. There was a huge public outcry that resulted in a backlash in Canada against Chinese imports, against the Chinese government. China has a pretty dubious track record in terms of human rights, their interference politically in Canada. And when we took Meng Wanzhou into custody, the Americans left us high and dry. We were on our own. They didn't come to our aid, even though we were helping them. But right now, Canada is reconsidering that relationship with China. Why? Because we can no longer trust the United States. And we know that we have maybe 150, maybe more Canadians in custody at ICE detention centers without the rule of law. Well, we had 2 Canadians under Chinese custody, and it caused a huge outcry. We have now over 150 in the United States. So when the Prime Minister's talking about us needing to rethink our trade relationships and our strategic relationships, the fact that we're now willing to entertain relations with the authoritarian government in Beijing shows that we can no longer maintain those relationships with the United States. So what does it mean in terms of trade? Well, certainly for the United States, they are going to suffer in the long term. They're already suffering. When Donald Trump threw the 140% arbitrary tariff on China, they responded by absolutely walking away on the U.S. agricultural industry. The soybean industry collapsed. China can push its weight around. China has now put limits on the rare earth metals that the American economy desperately needs. The Americans don't have a plan for that. They don't have rare earth minerals. Certainly our Prime Minister is going to be talking a lot about critical minerals and the ability of Canada to produce critical minerals in the coming years. Are we going to give this to the United States, or will we be better off dealing with Europe and Asia? Those are the questions we're going to have to ask. You know, I want to just frame as well that this is very much, there's been a lot of talk about the Chinese century. And I think it's going to happen a lot more now, because what we've seen is the death of the American century. The 80 plus years of American dominance, the American leadership around the world. Donald Trump killed that in the first 5 months in office. The American century is now over, and it's not coming back. And I'll give you an example. When Donald Trump started attacking the American universities, he targeted Harvard, he targeted Cornell, he targeted Berkeley, he targeted Columbia. These were the American think tanks for U.S. innovation. They were able to garner international students from around the world, the best of the best, the brightest of the brightest. That's what drove the American innovative agenda, was their ability through their universities to draw talent from around the world. And Donald Trump has killed that. People are not coming back to the United States to study because of the threat. The fact that you could be a Fulbright scholar and be picked up off the street and kidnapped and held by ICE. The fact that Donald Trump has said that foreign students represent a security threat to the United States and has targeted Harvard. What does that have to do with China? Well, think of this. The 10 top universities in the world right now, Harvard is number 1. The rest are all China. You take out Harvard, China becomes the dominant world center for research, innovation, science. That's what it is. But there are some polls that show of the top 10, once you take out Harvard, the next universities are China, and then there's the University of Toronto. Canada could become an innovation center. The American researchers who no longer feel safe in the United States could come to Canada. So there's a huge realignment happening right now. This is no longer the American century, and Canada has to make a decision. We're an orphan child in the world right now. Where do we belong? Who are we going to work with? Where will we build trade with? The fact that now we are starting to look back to the Asian market, when that Asian market was closed to us because of our relations with the United States, will be significant in the coming years. How it's going to play out in the long term, nobody knows. But what we can pretty much guarantee is that the United States has lost its advantage, it's lost its leadership role, and Canada is now deciding we've got to move on. So we're moving on with Europe, and here on the Pacific coast, as we watch the big transport ships coming into port, we're moving towards Asia in a much bigger way, and this is where the future is going to be. It's going to be without the United States, because Donald Trump has made the United States the pariah on international trade, and his constant threats has made them no longer the ally that we've always relied on. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here in the Port of Vancouver in the coming years. And Canada has to be ready, and I think Canada is ready to start moving on to a different future in this very uncertain 21st century. So, from Midas Canada, from the beautiful Pacific Ocean here in Vancouver, Charlie Angus, we keep kicking at that darkness. It's going to bleed daylight. Well, Midas Canada viewers, you can see why I'm so passionate about fighting for this country, fighting for our democracy, fighting to preserve and to celebrate this incredible land that we live in. If you like the work that we're doing, wherever you are in the world, please hit subscribe. This is a global conversation we're building with Midas Canada. You can follow me at Charlie Angus, The Resistance Substack, where I go deeper into a lot of these issues. And I'll just say, you know, touring the country like this, we think it's really important, but we're a super small team and we have limited resources. So if you want to help Midas Canada get out on the road, to tell the stories, to build the resistance at the grassroots level, maybe consider a contribution at info.charlieangus.ca. And thank you. We're going to keep kicking at that darkness, and it's going to bleed daylight.